The average American renter pays about $1,700 a month right now just to live somewhere. Almost 4 out of 10 renters spend more than a third of their income on rent alone, before food, before bills, before anything else. We talk about this like it's a brand new problem, like rent is some modern invention designed to make your life difficult. It isn't new. It's one of the oldest financial deals in human history. It started over 5,000 years ago. And the first landlord wasn't even a person. It was a building. This is the story of when humans started paying rent and why, 5,000 years later, you're still paying the same bill. Let's go back to Mesopotamia, around 3000 BC. At this point, most of the good farmland isn't owned by regular families. It's owned by temples. Big religious institutions with massive storehouses, line us to say zero interest in farming it themselves. So here's the deal they came up with. A farmer who doesn't own land works a piece of temple land. He plants it, waters it, harvests it. At the end of the season, he gives back a share of what he grew, often around a third of the harvest, sometimes as much as half to the temple. He keeps the rest. Sound familiar? That's rent. It's just paid in barley instead of dollars, and your landlord is a religious building instead of a guy named Gary who lives 2 states away and ignores your texts about the broken heater. The arrangement worked because of one simple imbalance. The temple had land it wasn't using, the farmer had labor and no land. So they made a trade access for a cut of the output. This is the exact same shape as a rent payment today. You don't own the apartment, someone else does. You pay them for the right to use it. The form has changed completely. The deal hasn't changed at all. And here's the thing, once that deal exists, it doesn't go away. It just spreads. Egypt did something similar, just with extra paperwork. Most farmland in ancient Egypt technically belonged to the pharaoh or to temples. Ordinary farmers worked that land and handed over a portion of their crops every year. Was that rent? Was it tax? Honestly, the line was so blurry it barely mattered. If you worked land you didn't own, and someone with power over that land took a cut of what you produced, that's rent, wearing a tax costume. Now let's jump forward to Rome, because this is where things start looking uncomfortably familiar. Most Romans, and we're talking regular working people, not just the poor, did not own their homes. They rented apartments in big multi-story buildings called insulae. Some of these buildings had 5, 6, even 7 floors. And who owned these buildings? Wealthy senators, politicians. The same people writing the laws were also your landlord. Rent was due monthly. Landlords raised prices whenever they felt like it. The lower floors were nicer, bigger rooms, actual windows. The higher floors were cramped, poorly built, and a fire hazard. Because Roman cities had constant building fires and the cheap wooden upper floor, that song went up like kindling. And here's the number that should make you sit up. Historians estimate that rent for a working Roman family could eat up somewhere between 40 and 60% of their income, not a third. Almost half, sometimes more, just to have a roof over your head, and not even a great one. The Roman writer Juvenal complained about this exact thing, paying good money to live in a building that could collapse or burn down at any moment, while the landlord lived comfortably somewhere else, completely safe. 2,000 years ago, a guy is writing essentially a furious blog post about his landlord. Some things really do not change. By this point, rent isn't just a farming arrangement anymore, it's an entire urban economy. Wealthy Romans didn't just own land, they owned buildings full of tenants, and that rental income was treated as a serious, reliable source of wealth. Real estate as an investment, in Rome, before the year 0. Now fast forward to medieval Europe, and rent gets a darker upgrade. Under the feudal system, peasants worked land owned by a lord. But instead of paying rent in grain or cash, they often paid it in labor, working the lord's fields for free for a set number of days, on top of farming their own small plot just to survive. This wasn't really optional. Peasants were frequently tied to the land itself. They couldn't just leave and rent somewhere else if they didn't like the deal. The landlord in this version also had legal and military power over you. Slowly, over centuries, as money economies grew, this shifted. Labor rent turned into cash rent. Peasants began paying lords in coins instead of work hours. It was, in some ways, an improvement. At least you could theoretically save up, move, change your situation. But the basic shape never changed. Someone owns the land, someone else needs it to survive. And the second person pays the first person, one way or another, just for permission to exist on it. Grain, labor, coins, different wrapping paper, same gift, and by gift I mean bill. So let's bring this all the way back to today. In 2026, About 35% of households in the US rent rather than own. The average rent is somewhere around $1,700 to $1,800 a month, depending on where you look. In Hawaii, it's closer to $2,400. Remember that ancient Mesopotamian farmer handing over roughly a third of his harvest, sometimes half, to the temple that owned his land? And remember that Roman family paying 40 to 60% of their income just to live in a building that might catch fire? Now look at the modern number again. Almost 40% of renters today are spending over a third of their income on rent. That's not a coincidence. That's the same range, 5,000 years apart. Mesopotamia, a third to a half. Rome, 40 to 60%. Today, over a third, and climbing for many. The numbers move around a little, but they've never left this same general band, somewhere between a third and a half of what a person produces, handed straight to whoever owns the thing they need to live. Different century, different currency, different landlord, same cut. Here's the uncomfortable part. We tend to think of rent as a cost of living issue, something that fluctuates with the economy, something policy can fix, something that's a modern symptom of modern problems. But rent isn't a symptom. It's one of the oldest features of civilization itself. It appeared the moment land ownership became unequal, the moment some people had more property than they could use and other people had none at all. Every economic system since then, no matter how it's dressed up, has had some version of this exact relationship running underneath it. The names changed: temple, pharaoh, senator, lord, landlord, property management company with a chatbot that won't fix your sink. The deal stayed exactly the same. So when did humans start paying rent? The honest answer is pretty much the moment humans started owning land unequally. The moment one person had more space than they could use and someone else had none, rent was basically inevitable. It didn't need to be invented so much as it just showed up, the way weeds show up in a garden you forgot to plant. For 5,000 years, the form has changed constantly. Barley, labor, coins, bank transfers, auto pay. But the relationship hasn't moved an inch. Someone owns the asset, someone else pays for access to it. And historically, that payment has eaten up somewhere around a third of what the renter has to give, whether that's a harvest or a paycheck. Maybe the real dividing line in any economy was never really about being rich or poor. Maybe it's always just been this: are you the one who owns the building, or are you the one who pays to live in it? That question is 5,000 years old. And as of this month, it's still due on the 1st.